The stagecoach rattled into Sacramento, California on a blistering afternoon in June of 1872, carrying within it a young woman whose knuckles had turned white from gripping the worn leather seat, and whose heart hammered so violently against her ribs she feared it might break through. Helena Wright pressed herself against the farthest corner of the coach, her gray eyes darting nervously between the driver and the other passengers, every muscle in her body coiled tight as a spring ready to snap. She had traveled nearly 2,000 miles from Philadelphia to meet a man she had only corresponded with through carefully worded letters. And now that the moment approached, the familiar terror that had haunted her for 3 years threatened to consume her entirely. The coach lurched to a stop outside the general store, sending up a cloud of dust that coated everything in sight with a fine layer of grit. Helena heard the driver call out that they had reached their destination, and her stomach twisted into knots so tight she thought she might be sick right there on the floorboards. The other passengers began gathering their belongings, chatting amicably about their plans, but Helena remained frozen, her small carpetbag clutched against her chest like a shield. "Miss, this is Sacramento. You getting out or staying on?" The driver's weathered face appeared in the doorway, his expression a mixture of impatience and concern. Helena forced herself to stand on trembling legs, nearly stumbling as she descended the coach steps into the harsh sunlight. The main street of Sacramento stretched before her, lined with wooden buildings that seemed to lean precariously in the afternoon heat. Men moved up and down the boardwalks, some tipping their hats to ladies, others engaged in loud conversation outside the saloon. The sight of so many men made her skin crawl, and she instinctively backed up against the coach, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. "You all right there, miss?" A man in a brown vest approached, and Helena flinched so violently she dropped her bag. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "please stay back." The man raised his hands and took several steps backward, his eyebrows knitting together in confusion. "Just trying to help, madam. You look a bit lost." Helena bent quickly to retrieve her bag, keeping her eyes on the man the entire time. "I am meeting someone. Carter Mitchell. Do you know him?" "Carter? Sure, everybody knows Carter. Got a ranch about 5 miles north of here. Good man, keeps to himself mostly." The man pointed down the street. "Try the telegraph office. He usually checks in there around this time when he is expecting deliveries." Helena managed a barely perceptible nod and hurried in the direction indicated, keeping as much distance as possible between herself and every man she passed. Her heart continued its frantic rhythm, and cold sweat gathered between her shoulder blades despite the heat. She had made it all this way, crossed an entire continent to escape the whispers and pitying looks of Philadelphia society, to try to build something resembling a normal life. But now, faced with the reality of meeting the man who would be her husband, every instinct screamed at her to run. The telegraph office was a small building wedged between a hardware store and a dressmaker's shop. Helena pushed open the door with shaking hands and stepped into the relative cool of the interior. A clerk stood behind the counter, sorting through papers, and in the corner, leaning against the wall with his hat tilted low over his eyes, stood a tall man in dusty work clothes. "Help you, miss?" The clerk asked. "I am looking for Carter Mitchell," Helena said softly, staying near the door in case she needed to bolt. The man in the corner straightened, pushing his hat back to reveal a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of a summer sky and a jaw covered in several days' worth of dark stubble. He was probably in his late 20s, with broad shoulders and work-roughened hands that he held carefully at his sides as he studied her. "Miss Wright?" His voice was low and careful, as though he were speaking to a spooked horse. Helena nodded, unable to find her voice. He was taller than she had imagined, more solid, more real. The letters had been safe, words on paper that could not hurt her. But this man could cross the room in 3 strides, could use those strong hands for violence if he chose, could overpower her without breaking a sweat. The old panic clawed its way up her throat. Carter Mitchell took a small step forward, and Helena immediately retreated, her back hitting the door. He stopped instantly, his expression shifting to one of concern. "I am not going to hurt you," he said quietly. "That is what they all say," Helena whispered, hating the tremor in her voice. Carter studied her for a long moment, taking in her pale face, her wide eyes, the way she held herself like someone expecting a blow. Something shifted in his expression, a deep understanding mixed with sadness. He turned to the clerk. "Johnson, you mind giving us a few minutes?" The clerk looked between them, curiosity evident on his face, but he nodded and stepped into the back room. Carter moved slowly to the chair near the counter and sat down, deliberately making himself less imposing by lowering his height. "Your letters never mentioned you were afraid," he said gently. Helena's hands twisted in the fabric of her skirt. "Would you have still agreed to marry me if I had told you that I shake whenever a man comes near, that sometimes I cannot breathe for the fear?" "Yes," Carter said without hesitation, "because fear like that does not come from nowhere. Someone hurt you badly enough to put that terror in your eyes, and that is not your fault." The simple acknowledgement, the lack of judgment in his voice, nearly undid her. Helena felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough in the past 3 years to last a lifetime. "I do not know if I can be a proper wife," she admitted. "I do not know if I can ever not be afraid." Carter leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, keeping his movements slow and predictable. "Then I will teach you trust. However long it takes, one day at a time, one moment at a time, I will show you that not all men are monsters, that you are safe with me." "Why would you do that? You could have any woman in Sacramento, someone who is not broken." "You are not broken," Carter said firmly. "You are hurt. There is a difference. And I asked you to come here because your letters showed me a woman with courage, intelligence, and hope, despite whatever hell you have been through. Those qualities do not disappear just because you are frightened." Helena looked at him properly for the first time, really looked at him. He sat perfectly still, non-threatening, his entire posture open and patient. His eyes held no malice, no hidden agenda, just honest concern and something that might have been determination. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I take you to my ranch. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who lives in a small cabin near the main house. She is expecting you and has prepared a room. You will have your own space, your own key for the door. We can take this as slowly as you need. And the marriage can wait until you are ready. Days, weeks, months. I am a patient man, Helena. I have waited this long for someone worth waiting for." The use of her first name, spoken so gently, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. Helena took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She had come this far. She had nothing to go back to in Philadelphia except shame and memories that woke her screaming in the night. Perhaps this man, this stranger who spoke of patience and trust, could truly be different. "I would like to see the ranch," she said, though her voice still shook. Carter stood slowly, telegraphing his movements. "My wagon is just outside. I will walk ahead of you, give you space. Anytime you need me to stop or slow down, just say so. This is your pace, not mine." They left the telegraph office, Carter keeping his word and walking several feet ahead of her. People on the street watched them with curious eyes, but Helena focused on putting one foot in front of the other. The wagon was a sturdy affair, clearly built for work rather than comfort. Carter climbed into the driver's seat and then hesitated. Would you prefer to sit in the back? More space between us. The fact that he thought to offer made Helena's decision easier. The front is fine, if I can have the far side. Of course. She climbed up, settling herself as far from him as the seat allowed, and Carter clicked his tongue to the horses. They started off at a gentle pace, leaving the bustle of Sacramento behind for the rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The landscape was so different from Philadelphia, wild and open in a way that both frightened and exhilarated her. "Tell me about your ranch," Helena said after several minutes of silence, needing to fill the quiet with something other than her own anxious thoughts. Carter kept his eyes on the road ahead. "It is not much, about 300 acres. I run cattle mostly, some horses. Built the house myself 5 years ago when I settled here. It is simple but solid. Mrs. Chen has been with me for 2 years. She is a good woman, lost her husband to illness and needed work. She has become something of a friend, though she insists on maintaining proper employer boundaries. You do not have any ranch hands. I have 2 who come during branding season and roundup. Rest of the time I manage on my own. I prefer the quiet, truth be told. Too many years spent around too many people before I came west." "What did you do before?" Carter was quiet for a moment. "I was a soldier, fought in the war back east, saw things, did things that still visit me in my sleep sometimes. When it was over, I could not stay in the cities around all the noise and crowds. I needed space, peace, found it here." Helena processed this information. So he understood nightmares, understood being haunted by the past. Perhaps that was why his letters had resonated with her, why she had dared to answer his advertisement when others had gone into the fire. "What happened to you?" Carter asked quietly. "You do not have to tell me if you are not ready, but I think I need to understand what I am working with here, what might set you off." Helena's throat tightened. She had never spoken about it aloud, not in detail. The authorities in Philadelphia had taken her basic statement, and her family had urged her to forget it, to pretend it never happened, as if trauma could be erased by simply refusing to acknowledge it. 3 years ago I was engaged," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Richard Hartley. He came from a good family, seemed respectable. My parents were thrilled with the match." She paused, gathering courage. 2 months before the wedding, I went to his home to deliver some embroidery his mother had requested. He was supposed to be at his office, but he was home. And he decided that since we were to be married anyway, certain liberties were acceptable. Carter's hands tightened on the reins, but he said nothing, letting her continue at her own pace. "I fought him, scratched his face badly enough to leave scars. A servant heard the commotion and came running. That is the only reason he did not succeed completely." Helena's voice had gone flat, emotionless, the only way she could get through the telling. "But he had torn my dress, left bruises on my arms and throat. The servant was a witness. I thought justice would be served. But it was not," Carter said grimly. "No. His family had money, influence. My word against his. He claimed I had come to him willingly, had encouraged him, and then became hysterical when I realized someone had seen us. He called me unstable, said I had always been prone to feminine dramatics. His family's lawyer painted me as a woman of questionable morals trying to trap a wealthy man." The old bitterness crept into her voice. "The case was dismissed. My engagement was broken, of course, but so was my reputation. People whispered wherever I went. Some believed me, but most found it easier to believe I had brought it on myself somehow. Helena, I am sorry." The words were simple, but the sincerity in Carter's voice made them mean something. "I became afraid after that, not just of Richard, but of all men. Every man on the street became a potential threat. I stopped leaving the house unless absolutely necessary. My parents did not know what to do with me. They suggested I needed rest, perhaps time in an institution for my nerves. She laughed, a harsh sound, as if fear were madness rather than a rational response to attempted violation. So you decided to come west. I saw your advertisement in a newspaper my father had brought home. You wrote about wanting a partner, someone who valued honesty and hard work. You did not mention beauty or obedience or any of the usual things men demand. Something about your words made me think perhaps you might be different. And even if you were not, at least I would be far from Philadelphia, far from the whispers and the pitying looks and Richard Hartley's satisfied face every time I had to cross the street to avoid him. Carter pulled the wagon to a stop. They had reached a grove of oak trees that provided shade from the relentless sun. He turned to look at her, careful to keep distance between them. I cannot undo what was done to you. I cannot erase your fear or make you forget. But I can promise you this: you are safe here. On my land, in my home, you will never have cause to fear for your safety or your virtue. Any man who tries to hurt you will answer to me. And I will never, not once, force my attentions on you or demand anything you are not freely willing to give. You have my word as a man, and I do not give my word lightly. Helena searched his face, looking for any sign of deception, any hint of the cruelty she had learned to watch for. But she saw only steady honesty in those blue eyes, a quiet strength that was nothing like the blustering dominance Richard had displayed. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "Then start there. We will build on wanting." He turned back to the horses and started them moving again. "The ranch is just over this next rise." The house came into view 5 minutes later, and Helena felt something in her chest loosen slightly. It was indeed simple, a solid wooden structure with a wide porch wrapped around two sides. The barn stood off to the left, freshly painted red, and beyond it stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed lazily in the heat. Several large oak trees shaded the house, and she could see a vegetable garden to one side, neatly tended. A woman emerged from the house as they approached, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and shrewd dark eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Chen," Carter called as he pulled the wagon to a stop. "This is Miss Wright, Mrs." Chen came forward, but she stopped several feet from the wagon, her gaze assessing Helena with the kind of quick intelligence that seemed to understand everything in a glance. "Welcome, Miss Wright. I have your room ready. Would you like to freshen up from your journey?" "Yes, please," Helena said gratefully. Carter climbed down from the wagon and reached up as if to help her, then caught himself and lowered his hands. "Sorry, habit." Helena carefully descended on her own, keeping the wagon between herself and Carter. "Mrs." Chen nodded approvingly at this and gestured toward the house. "Come along, dear. Mr. Mitchell will bring your things. Your room is at the back of the house, nice and quiet. The door has a lock, and I have the only other key besides yours. Mr. Mitchell's room is at the front, good distance between." She shot Carter a meaningful look, as it should be for unmarried folks. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," Carter said dryly. "Your supervision of propriety is, as always, thorough." The inside of the house was cooler, with windows positioned to catch the breeze. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Everything was clean and practical, without much in the way of decoration, but it had a comfortable, lived-in feeling that was absent from the stuffy Philadelphia townhouses Helena had known. Mrs. Chen led her down a short hallway and opened a door at the end. The room was small but bright, with a window overlooking the garden, a simple iron bedstead with a colorful quilt, a dresser, and a washstand. A rag rug covered the wooden floor and white curtains fluttered in the breeze. "It is not fancy," Mrs. Chen said, "but it is clean and private. I am right next door in my cabin if you need anything, day or night. You just call out." "It is perfect," Helena said, and meant it. The room felt safe, manageable. She could breathe here. A soft knock at the door made her tense, but it was just Carter leaving her carpet bag just inside the threshold before retreating immediately. "I will let you get settled," his voice came from the hallway. "Mrs. Chen will bring you some food. Supper is not for a few hours yet, so rest if you need. No expectations, no schedule. Make yourself at home." His footsteps retreated, and Helena heard the front door close. She sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. The fear had not disappeared, still coiled in her belly like a snake, but it had lessened slightly. Carter had kept his word so far, maintaining distance, respecting her boundaries. Perhaps, just perhaps, she had made the right decision in coming here. Mrs. Chen returned shortly with a tray bearing bread, cheese, and cold water. She set it on the dresser and then surprised Helena by sitting in the room's single chair. "He is a good man," Mrs. Chen said without preamble. "I would not work for him if he was not, but I see the fear in your eyes and I recognize it. I know what it means when a woman cannot bear to be near men." "You know," Helena asked softly. "My husband was a good man, but I knew many who were not. I knew women on the ships coming from China, women who had been taken by force, sold like cattle. I saw that same look in their eyes." Mrs. Chen's face was compassionate but matter-of-fact. "Whatever happened to you, child, I am sorry for it. But you should know that Carter Mitchell is one of the rare ones. He will keep his word to you. He is patient and he is kind and he will not harm you." "How can you be so certain?" "Because in 2 years of working here, I have never once felt unsafe, not once, and I am a woman who has learned to sense danger." Mrs. Chen stood. "Give him a chance. Give yourself a chance. Healing is possible even when it seems impossible." After she left, Helena ate the simple meal and then lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The journey had exhausted her more than she realized, and despite her anxiety, sleep crept over her. For the first time in weeks, she slept without nightmares. She woke to the sound of voices outside her window. Disoriented, she rose and peered out to see Carter working in the garden, pulling weeds from between the vegetable rows. His movements were economical, practiced, and he hummed tunelessly as he worked. It was such a normal, peaceful scene that Helena found herself watching for several minutes before he glanced up and saw her at the window. He raised a hand in greeting but did not approach the house, just went back to his work. The consideration of that, the awareness of not crowding her, made Helena's throat tight with an emotion she could not quite name. She washed her face and hands in the basin and ventured out into the main room. Mrs. Chen was at the stove, stirring something that smelled wonderful. "Good, you are up. How are you at chopping vegetables? I could use some help with supper." The casual request, treating her like a normal person rather than a fragile thing to be handled carefully, was exactly what Helena needed. She moved to the counter and began chopping carrots under Mrs. Chen's direction. They worked in companionable silence for a while before Mrs. Chen spoke again. "He has been alone since he came here. Some women in town have tried to catch his eye, but he was never interested. Said he wanted someone who understood that quiet living was not the same as lonely living." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I think you need to know he chose you specifically from your letters. He could have had prettier, easier. But he wanted real, and you gave him that in your writing. Do not sell yourself short just because you carry scars." Carter came in as the sun was setting, pausing at the door to remove his dusty boots. He padded to the washstand in stocking feet and cleaned up before joining them at the table Mrs. Chen had set. He took the seat farthest from Helena without being asked. Supper was a venison stew with vegetables and fresh bread. Simple but delicious. Carter ate with good appetite, occasionally complimenting Mrs. Chen's cooking, but mostly letting the women carry the conversation. Helena found herself relaxing incrementally, lulled by the domestic normality of it all. "I thought tomorrow I might show you around the ranch properly," Carter said as Mrs. Chen cleared the plates. "Only if you want, of course. But it might help you feel more settled if you know the lay of the land." Helena considered. The thought of being alone with him, away from the house, sent a spike of fear through her. But she could not live her entire life within these walls, and he had done nothing to warrant her distrust beyond simply being male. "Will Mrs. Chen come with us?" she asked. "If that would make you more comfortable, certainly." He glanced at the housekeeper. "Though it is your day off tomorrow, and I know you were planning to visit your friend in town." "I can postpone," Mrs. Chen offered. "No," Helena said, surprising herself. "No, you should go. I will be fine." Carter's expression showed approval. "We will stay in open areas, well within sight of the house. And you can bring one of the dogs along if you like. Rex is partial to long walks." As if summoned by his name, a large brown dog pushed through the door Carter had left ajar and padded over to the table, his tail wagging hopefully. Helena tensed, but the dog ignored her, going straight to Carter and resting his head on his knee. "This is Rex. I found him half-starved 2 years ago, brought him home. He has been a faithful companion ever since." Carter scratched the dog behind his ears. "Rex, come meet Helena." The dog obediently trotted over, sitting a respectful distance away and looking at her with soulful brown eyes. Helena had always liked dogs, found them easier than people. She extended her hand slowly, letting him sniff, and was rewarded with a gentle lick. "He likes you," Carter observed. "He is an excellent judge of character. Or he is hoping I will sneak him scraps," Helena said, a tiny smile tugging at her lips. It was the first time she had smiled since arriving, and Carter's face lit up like she had given him a gift. "That too. Fair warning, he will absolutely take advantage if you let him." That night, lying in her bed with the door securely locked and Rex curled up on the rag rug by her door after Carter had asked if she wanted the dog for company, Helena reflected on the strangeness of her new life. She was in the middle of nowhere, living with people she had just met, promised to a man who terrified her simply by virtue of his gender. Yet she felt safer here than she had in months back in Philadelphia. Perhaps, she thought as sleep claimed her again, perhaps this was what hope felt like after so long without it. The next morning, she woke to find someone had left a breakfast tray outside her door. Fresh biscuits, jam, and coffee still steaming in a tin cup. She ate in her room, gathering courage for the day ahead. When she emerged, Carter was waiting on the porch, Rex at his side. He wore clean work clothes and his hat, and he had shaved, she noticed. The consideration of that, making himself more presentable for her, was not lost on her. "Ready?" he asked. Helena nodded, stepping out into the morning coolness. The heat had not yet built to its midday intensity, and the air smelled of grass and earth and growing things. They walked in silence for a while, Rex bounding ahead to investigate interesting smells. Carter kept a careful distance, his hands in his pockets, non-threatening. He led her to the barn first, a cavernous structure that smelled of hay and horses. "I have 3 horses currently," he said, gesturing to the stalls. "Dusty here is my riding horse, steady as they come. Bella is a bit spirited but responsive, and the old fellow in the end stall is Jack. He was here when I bought the property, probably 25 years old now. Retired, but I cannot bring myself to put him down while he is still enjoying his oats." Helena approached Jack's stall cautiously. The old horse regarded her with wise, gentle eyes and huffed softly. Without thinking, she reached out to stroke his velvety nose. "He is sweet," she murmured. "He is. I sometimes think he has figured out the secret to life. Just be patient, be kind, and the oats will come." Carter leaned against the post, watching her interact with the horse. "You ride." "I used to. My father taught me when I was young, but I have not been on a horse in years. Might be something to pick back up if you want. Bella would suit you, I think. She appreciates a gentle hand." They continued the tour, Carter showing her the chicken coop where a dozen hens scratched and clucked, the smokehouse, the root cellar, and the various outbuildings that kept a ranch functioning. He explained his plans for expanding the herd, for building a better irrigation system for the garden, for all the dreams he had for this land he was carving into something productive and good. Helena found herself relaxing as they walked, caught up in his enthusiasm despite her wariness. He clearly loved this place, poured his heart into every fence post and furrow. There was something healing in his connection to the land, a rootedness that spoke to her own need for solid ground beneath her feet. They stopped at a spot where a creek ran through his property, lined with willows that provided dappled shade. Carter settled himself on a fallen log a good 10 feet from where Helena stood, giving her space. "This is my favorite spot on the whole ranch," he said, gazing at the water. "I come here when things feel too heavy, when the nightmares get bad. The sound of the water helps." "You still have nightmares?" Helena asked, sitting carefully on a rock near the creek bank. "Most nights, to some degree. War does not leave you clean. I watched men die, killed some myself." "That stays with you." He picked up a small stone and tossed it into the water. "I am learning to live with it, the memories. They are part of me now, part of what made me who I am. I figure your fear is similar. It might never fully go away, but maybe it can become something you carry rather than something that carries you." Helena considered this. She had been thinking of her fear as something to overcome, to defeat utterly. But perhaps Carter's way made more sense. Perhaps it was about learning to function despite the fear, to not let it dictate every choice. "Why did you really want a mail-order bride?" she asked. "Surely there were women here you could have courted properly." Carter was quiet for a moment. "Because proper courting means dancing and socials and all manner of situations where people are watching, judging. I'm not good with crowds anymore, with loud noises and expectations. And the women here deserve someone who can give them those things without breaking into a cold sweat. I thought a letter correspondence would let me find someone who might understand a quieter life, someone who would not expect things from me I cannot give." "So we are both running from something," Helena said softly. "Maybe. Or maybe we are running toward something better. Perspective matters." Rex chose that moment to come crashing through the brush, covered in mud and extremely pleased with himself. Carter took one look at the dog and sighed. "Well, I know what I am doing this afternoon. Come on, you disaster." They walked back to the house, and Helena helped Carter wash the dog in a large tub near the barn. It was messy, chaotic work, and Rex's enthusiastic shaking soaked them both thoroughly. But it was also fun in a way Helena had not experienced in far too long. She found herself laughing as Rex tried to escape the tub, as Carter made exaggerated complaints about ungrateful animals while clearly delighting in the dog's antics. When they were finished, both dripping wet and covered in dog hair, Carter looked at her and grinned. "Well, this is not quite how I planned to impress you, but at least you know life here is never boring." Helena looked down at her soaked dress, at Carter's wet shirt plastered to his frame, at Rex rolling happily in the grass to dry off, and felt something shift inside her. This ridiculous, messy moment held more genuine warmth than any of the elaborate courtship rituals she had endured with Richard. "Thank you," she said impulsively. "For getting you soaked?" Carter asked, bemused. "For being real. for not pretending to be something you are not." His expression softened. "I would not know how to be anything else, Helena. This is all I have to offer. Honest work, simple living, and a promise to never hurt you. It is not much compared to what you could have had." "What I could have had was a lie wrapped in fine clothes and pretty words," she said. "This is better." That evening, as they sat on the porch after supper watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, Helena realized she had gone an entire day without a panic attack, without the crushing fear that usually accompanied being near a man. Carter's patient presence, his careful maintenance of boundaries, was slowly showing her that safety was possible. "Can I ask you something?" Carter said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Of course. What made you respond to my advertisement specifically? There must have been others." Helena thought back to those desperate days, reading through advertisements with shaking hands, looking for anything that might offer escape. "You wrote about wanting a partner, not just a wife. You talked about building something together, about shared work and shared purpose." "Every other advertisement I read treated marriage as a transaction. Man provides security, woman provides cooking and children. Yours was different. It suggested equality, respect. Even if I was terrified, I wanted that." "I am glad you saw that. It is what I meant." He paused. "I want you to know, Helena, there is no pressure here. We do not have to get married at all if you decide this arrangement is not what you want. I can help you find a position in town, or pay your way back to Philadelphia if that is what you choose. You are not trapped here." The offer, freely given, paradoxically made Helena more certain she wanted to stay. A man who was willing to let her go was precisely the kind of man she could trust to let her stay on her own terms. "I want to try," she said quietly. "I want to see if this could work, but I need time." "Then time is what you will have. All you need." Over the following weeks, a careful routine developed. Helena spent her days helping Mrs. Chen with household tasks, tending the garden and gradually exploring more of the ranch. Carter worked the land, fixed fences, tended the cattle, always making sure Helena knew where he would be so she would not be startled by unexpected encounters. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about their days or their pasts or their hopes for the future. Carter told her about his childhood in Kentucky, about losing his parents to illness, about the war and its aftermath. Helena shared memories of better times in Philadelphia, her love of reading, her skill with embroidery that she had not picked up since the attack. Slowly, incrementally, the space between them on the porch bench began to shrink. Where initially Helena had sat at the far end, leaving nearly 6 feet between them, she gradually moved closer as the weeks passed. First 5 feet, then 4, then 3. Carter never commented on it, never acknowledged the progress, just accepted whatever distance she needed. One evening in late July, a month after her arrival, a storm rolled in suddenly, bringing violent thunder and lightning. Helena, who had been in her room reading, was jolted by a particularly loud crack and found herself gasping, heart racing, transported back to that day in Richard's house when she had screamed for help while thunder boomed outside. Without thinking, operating on pure panic, she stumbled out of her room calling for Mrs. Chen, forgetting that the housekeeper had gone to visit her friend in town and was staying overnight. She nearly collided with Carter in the hallway, and he instinctively reached out to steady her. His hands on her shoulders sent her spiraling. She cried out, shoving him away with surprising strength, and backed up against the wall, trembling violently. I'm sorry," Carter said immediately, raising his hands and backing away. "I should not have grabbed you, I forgot." "I am sorry, Helena." She slid down the wall, wrapping her arms around her knees, trying to breathe through the panic attack. The thunder boomed again, and she whimpered despite herself. "Look at me," Carter's voice came from several feet away. "Helena, look at me. You are safe. I am not going to touch you. I am going to sit right here on the floor, far enough away that you can breathe. You are safe." She forced her eyes open, found him sitting cross-legged on the hallway floor at least 8 feet away, his posture non-threatening, his face full of concern and regret. "I am sorry," she managed. "I know you did not mean anything by it. I know you were just trying to help. You do not have to apologize for your fear. Ever. I should have been more careful." They sat there on the floor as the storm raged outside, neither moving, while Helena fought to regain control of her breathing. Eventually, the panic began to subside, leaving her exhausted and shaky. "Can you tell me what helps?" Carter asked gently. "When this happens, what do you need?" Helena thought about it. "Space and grounding. Sometimes I count things I can see, touch, hear. It brings me back to the present instead of the past." "All right, let me try something. Can you tell me 5 things you can see right now?" She looked around the dim hallway. "The lamp. The picture of the mountains on the wall. Your boots by the door. Rex sleeping in the corner, the rain through the window. Good. 4 things you can touch: the floorboards, the wall behind me, my dress, my hair. 3 things you can hear: the rain, the thunder, your voice. 2 things you can smell: the coffee from earlier, the wood smoke from the fire. 1 thing you can taste: the biscuit from supper, butter and honey." Her breathing had steadied, her heart rate slowing. The panic had receded, leaving her tired but present. "Better?" Carter asked. "Yes." "Thank you. How did you know to do that?" "Had a friend during the war who taught me. He got bad panic attacks from the cannon fire. Said grounding techniques helped more than anything else." Carter shifted slightly, still maintaining distance. "Do you want me to leave you alone, or would company help? I can read aloud from here if you want the distraction, or I can go to my room if you would rather." Helena surprised herself. "Stay, please. Not in my room, but maybe you could read from the main room. Leave the doors open so I can hear." "Of course." He rose carefully and retrieved a book from the shelf, settling into the chair near the fireplace where she could see him from her room. For the next hour, as the storm continued, he read aloud from a collection of Whitman's poetry, his voice steady and calm, a lifeline in the darkness. Helena lay in her bed, door open, listening to his voice paint pictures of leaves of grass and the open road, and felt the last of her panic drain away. When the storm finally passed and Carter quietly asked if she was all right, she answered honestly, "Yes, I think I am." The next morning, they did not speak about the incident, but something had shifted between them. Helena had seen him at his most careful, most considerate, and even in her moment of greatest vulnerability, he had not taken advantage. He had given her exactly what she needed: space, patience, and presence. As August arrived, bringing blistering heat and clear blue skies, Helena found herself watching Carter more carefully. The way he moved through the world with quiet competence, the gentleness he showed to the animals, the respect he gave Mrs. Chen and herself, all of it painted a picture of a man fundamentally different from Richard Hartley. One morning, she surprised him by asking to learn to ride again. His face lit up with pleasure, and he spent the afternoon helping her relearn the basics on Bella. He never touched her to adjust her seat or hands, just gave verbal instructions and demonstrations, respecting her need for autonomy over her own body. "You are a natural," he called as she trotted Bella around the paddock. "Few more days of practice and you will be ready for the trails." Helena felt a surge of pride and something else, something warmer and more complicated. She was proud that he was proud of her, wanted to earn that approval, that gentle smile he gave when he thought she could not see him watching. Mrs. Chen noticed the change, of course. "You are looking at him differently," she observed one afternoon while they preserved vegetables from the garden. "I do not know what you mean," Helena said, but her flushed cheeks betrayed her. "You are starting to see the man instead of the threat. It is good, natural, but be careful with your heart, child. Opening yourself to trust means opening yourself to hurt. Have you ever been in love?" Helena asked impulsively. Mrs. Chen's stern face softened. "Once. My husband. He was a good man, gentle and kind, loved me truly. I still miss him every day, but I do not regret a moment. Love is worth the risk of loss. How do you know if it is love or just gratitude for kindness? Time. Patience. The way your heart jumps when he walks in the room, the way you want to know his thoughts, share his burdens, the way his happiness matters as much as your own." Mrs. Chen gave her a knowing look. "You will know when you know." That evening, Carter announced he needed to drive into Sacramento the next day for supplies and to conduct some business at the bank. "Would you like to come?" he asked Helena. "Or would you prefer to stay here? No judgment either way." Helena's first instinct was to refuse, to stay in the safety of the ranch. But she thought about what she had told Carter, about not letting fear carry her. She had to start reclaiming her life eventually. "I will come," she said, then added, "if we can leave early, get the errands done before the streets get too crowded." "Absolutely. We will leave at dawn." They made the journey in the cool morning air, arriving in Sacramento just as the town was waking. Carter handled his business efficiently, always keeping her in sight, always positioning himself between her and any men who came too close. The subtle protection, done without fanfare or expectation of gratitude, touched her deeply. At the general store, while Carter discussed lumber prices with the clerk, Helena wandered to the fabric section. She had not sewn since the attack, but she found herself drawn to a bolt of deep blue cotton that would make a lovely shirt for Carter. His work shirts were all worn and faded, and the thought of making him something new, something chosen specifically for him, felt right. She purchased enough fabric without telling him what it was for, adding thread and buttons to her purchases. Carter paid without question, loading their supplies into the wagon. They were preparing to leave when a voice called out. "Carter Mitchell, as I live and breathe." A man approached, roughly Carter's age, with sandy hair and a wide grin. Carter's expression remained neutral, though not hostile. "Tom Stevens. Been a while. 2 years at least. Heard you had brought yourself a bride from back east." Tom's gaze slid to Helena with undisguised curiosity. "You must be something special to get this hermit to come out of his cave." Helena tensed at the attention, moving fractionally closer to the wagon. Carter noticed immediately. "We were just leaving," Carter said, his tone polite but firm. "Good to see you, Tom. Come on, at least introduce us properly. Maybe you and the lady would like to come to the harvest dance next month. Whole town will be there." "I do not think so, but thanks for the invitation." Carter moved to help Helena into the wagon, careful not to touch her, just offering his hand as an option. She took it briefly, surprised by the calloused warmth of his palm, and climbed up. Tom seemed to realize he had overstepped. "Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find us. Good to see you happy, Carter." As they drove away, Helena glanced at Carter. "You did not have to refuse on my account. If you wanted to go to the dance." "I do not. Crowds and I do not mix well, and I figured they would not be your preferred environment either. Besides, I would rather spend an evening on our porch than in a hot, noisy hall trying to make small talk with people I barely know." Our porch. The casual possessive made Helena's heart skip. When had she started thinking of it that way too? When had this place, this man, become home? September arrived with cooler temperatures and the promise of fall. Helena had finished Carter's shirt, working on it in secret in her room during quiet afternoons. She was nervous about giving it to him, worried he might read too much into the gesture or not enough. She waited until after supper one evening, then presented it awkwardly, wrapped in brown paper. "I made you something, to thank you for everything." Carter opened the package carefully, his expression going soft when he saw the shirt. He held it up, examining her careful stitching, the neat buttonholes, the way she had sized it perfectly to his frame. "Helena, this is beautiful. You did not have to do this." "I wanted to. Your work shirts are falling apart and I thought I wanted to make you something nice." He met her eyes and something passed between them, an understanding that this was more than just a practical gift. This was her way of saying she saw him, appreciated him, cared about his comfort and happiness. "I will wear it to church this Sunday," he said, proudly. Church was another new development. Carter had asked a few weeks earlier if she would like to attend services in town, and after much internal debate, Helena had agreed to try. They sat in the back row, arriving just as the service started and leaving immediately after, minimizing her exposure to crowds. But it was progress, another step toward reclaiming normalcy. That Sunday, Carter wore his new blue shirt, and Helena noticed several women in the congregation whispering and casting glances their way. She felt a surge of possessiveness that surprised her. He looked handsome, she realized, seeing him through their eyes. Handsome and good in hers, or at least potentially hers if she could find the courage to fully let him in. After church, as they drove home, Carter cleared his throat. "I have been thinking. We have been doing this dance for 3 months now, and I think we have gotten to a place where we are comfortable around each other. But I realize I have never formally courted you, not properly. I would like to do that, if you are willing. Take things slow but intentional, let you know my intentions are serious." Helena's pulse quickened. "What would that look like?" "Well, I would like to hold your hand sometimes if you would allow it, not all the time, just when it feels right. And maybe we could sit closer on the porch, share a bench without all this space between us. I would like to learn what makes you happy, what your favorite things are, what you dream about. Court you the way you should have been courted the first time, with respect and patience. And if I need to step back sometimes, if the fear comes back, then we step back. No hard feelings, no pressure, you set the pace always." Helena thought about it, about the way her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, the way she looked forward to their evening talks, the way his presence had become a comfort rather than a threat. "Yes," she said softly, "I would like that." His smile was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. When they reached the ranch, he came around to her side of the wagon and extended his hand. "May I help you down?" She looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and scarred from hard work, steady and patient as the man himself. Then she placed her hand in his and let him help her down. His touch was brief, gentle, and when her feet touched the ground, he squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "Thank you for saying yes," he said. That night, Helena lay in bed replaying the moment, the feel of his hand in hers, the warmth of his smile. She was not fully free of fear, might never be, but she was learning that fear and trust could coexist, that healing was not a straight line but a winding path with setbacks and surges forward. Over the following weeks, their courtship unfolded with the same patient gentleness that had characterized their relationship from the start. Carter would ask permission before taking her hand on their evening walks. They began sitting closer on the porch, eventually sharing the bench with their shoulders nearly touching. He brought her wildflowers from the meadow, helped her plant bulbs in the garden for spring blooming, taught her to read the sky for weather signs. In return, Helena began to open up more, sharing not just the trauma that had brought her west, but the dreams she had set aside, the things she enjoyed. She told him about her love of poetry, and he began reading Dickinson and Browning aloud to her. She mentioned missing the theater, and he fashioned a simple stage in the barn where he performed ridiculous dramatic readings that made her laugh until she cried. "You are terrible at this," she gasped one evening after he had massacred a monologue from Shakespeare. "I know," he said cheerfully. "But I made you laugh, so I consider it a success." The first time she laughed, really laughed without restraint, he had looked at her with such wonder that she felt her chest tighten with emotion. "I like your laugh," he had said simply. "I want to hear it more." October brought harvest time, and with it came Carter's two seasonal ranch hands, brothers named Jack and Thomas Morrison. Helena was nervous about having strange men on the property, but Carter prepared her in advance, explaining they would be staying in the bunkhouse far from the main house and working primarily in the outer pastures. When they arrived, he introduced them with clear instructions. "This is my fiancée, Helena. She prefers her personal space, and I expect you to respect that. No approaching her without clear reason. Keep distance when you must interact." The brothers, weathered men in their 40s, simply nodded their understanding. If they thought the instructions odd, they were wise enough not to comment. Over the week they worked, Helena observed them from a safe distance and found they were respectful, keeping their eyes down and their focus on their work. One afternoon, she ventured out with water for the workers, wanting to contribute. Thomas thanked her kindly, taking the ladle without letting his hand brush hers, and Jack simply tipped his hat. The interaction was brief and unremarkable, but afterward, Helena felt a surge of pride. She had done it, had interacted with strange men without panic. Carter, who had watched from nearby without being obvious about it, gave her an approving smile when the men returned to work. That evening, he told her how proud he was of her progress, and the genuine admiration in his voice meant more than any grand gesture. As October waned toward November, Helena realized with startling clarity that she had fallen in love with Carter Mitchell. It had happened gradually, so slowly she had not noticed until it was complete. She loved his quiet strength, his patience, his gentle humor. She loved the way he cared for his land and animals, the way he respected Mrs. Chen, the way he had never once made her feel broken or deficient. She loved his hands and his voice and his steadfast presence. The realization terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Loving someone meant vulnerability, meant opening herself to potential hurt. But it also meant hope, meant a future she had thought impossible. One evening in early November, they sat on the porch in companionable silence, close enough that their shoulders touched. The first frost had come the night before, and they huddled under a shared blanket against the chill. "Carter," Helena said softly. "Yes, I think I am ready." "Ready for what?" he asked, though something in his tone suggested he knew. "Ready to marry you. Actually marry you, not just someday but soon." He turned to look at her, his blue eyes searching her face. "Are you sure? There is no rush, Helena. We have all the time in the world." "I am sure." "I love you. It took me a while to recognize it, to trust it, but I do. I love you, and I want to be your wife, not just in name but in truth." His hand came up slowly, telegraphing the movement, and cupped her cheek with infinite tenderness. "I have loved you since your third letter, when you wrote about finding courage in small acts of defiance. I thought then that you were the bravest person I had never met. Getting to know you has only confirmed it. I would be honored to be your husband, Helena." "Can I try something?" she whispered. "Anything. Can I kiss you? I know it might seem backward, but I need to know I can do it, that I can choose this." "Of course. Whatever you need." Helena leaned in slowly, giving herself every opportunity to retreat if the fear came. but all she felt was nervous anticipation and love as her lips brushed his. The kiss was soft, tentative, and brief, but it was hers, her choice, her terms. When she pulled back, she was shaking, but not from fear. "How was that?" Carter asked gently. "Perfect. Overwhelming. Good." "Can we do it again?" He smiled. "As many times as you want." The second kiss was longer, deeper, and Helena felt something in her chest break open, some last wall crumbling under the weight of his gentleness and her trust. When they finally parted, she was crying, but they were tears of relief and joy rather than pain. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder as he carefully drew her into an embrace, always giving her room to pull away if needed. "Thank you for being patient, for teaching me trust." "Thank you for giving me the chance," he murmured into her hair, "for choosing me despite everything." They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the church, with Mrs. Chen and the pastor's wife as witnesses. Helena wore a simple cream dress she had sewn herself, and Carter wore his blue shirt and his best pants, and when he said his vows, his voice was steady and sure. "I promise to honor you, protect you, and cherish you all the days of my life. I promise to respect your boundaries and your needs. I promise to be patient when you need space and present when you need comfort. I promise to love you, Helena, in all the ways you need to be loved." Helena's vows were simpler, but no less heartfelt. "I promise to trust you, to build a life with you, to choose you every day. I promise to love you with all that I am and all that I am becoming. You have taught me that love does not have to hurt, and I promise to honor that gift." Their wedding night was nothing like traditional expectations, and that was exactly as it should be. They returned to the ranch as the sun set, and Carter started a fire in the bedroom fireplace to ward off the November chill. Helena was nervous, trembling despite her love for him, and Carter saw it immediately. "We do not have to do anything tonight," he said gently. "Or any night until you are ready. Being married does not change my promises to you." "I want to," Helena said. "I want to try, but I might need to stop." "Then we will stop, as many times as you need. This is about both of us, Helena, and it should be good for both of us." "If it is not, we will wait." He held out his hand. "We will go as slowly as you need. You are in control here." What followed was an education in patience and tenderness. Carter let Helena set every boundary, every progression, checking in constantly, stopping when she tensed, praising her courage. It took time, and there were moments when the fear surged and she had to pause, breathe, ground herself. But Carter never showed frustration or disappointment, just endless patience and love. When they finally came together, it was nothing like the violence Richard had attempted. It was slow and gentle and sacred, a joining born of trust and love rather than force. Afterward, Helena cried again, this time in cathartic release, and Carter held her, stroking her hair and telling her how brave she was, how much he loved her, how honored he was to be her husband. "I did not break," she whispered against his chest. "You were never broken," he reminded her. "Just hurt, and now you are healing." The winter months passed in peaceful domesticity. Helena and Carter settled into married life with the same patience that had characterized their courtship. There were difficult moments, times when her fear resurged unexpectedly, when nightmares woke her gasping. But Carter never wavered, never showed anything but understanding and support. Mrs. Chen moved to a larger cabin on the property, giving the newlyweds more privacy while remaining close enough to provide companionship for Helena during the long days when Carter worked the land. The older woman became not just employee but friend, teaching Helena the finer points of ranch living and sharing stories of her own past. Spring arrived with a profusion of wildflowers and new calves, and with it came a new development. Helena realized her monthly courses had not come. that her body was changing in ways that suggested new life growing within her. The realization brought a complex tangle of emotions: joy, fear, wonder, and anxiety. She told Carter one evening as they sat watching the sunset, "I think I am with child." His face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, joy, concern. "How do you feel about it? Scared, happy, terrified, excited, all of it at once?" She took his hand. "What if I cannot do this? What if the fear makes me a bad mother?" "That will not happen," Carter said firmly. "You are the strongest person I know, Helena, and whatever comes, we will face it together. You will not be alone in this." True to his word, Carter was a steady presence throughout her pregnancy. He read books on childbirth and infant care, consulted with Mrs. Chen, who had helped deliver babies in her younger days, and made arrangements for the doctor in Sacramento to come when the time arrived. As Helena's belly grew, so did her confidence. The fear that had defined her for so long began to feel less like a constant shadow and more like an occasional visitor. She would never be completely free of it, she understood now, but it no longer ruled her life. In late November of 1873, just over a year after her arrival in Sacramento, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, but Carter stayed with her throughout, holding her hand, wiping her brow, offering strength when hers flagged. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced, Carter wept openly. "He is perfect," he said, carefully cradling the tiny bundle. "You are perfect. Thank you for this gift." They named him Thomas James Mitchell, honoring both their fathers, and he became the center of their world. Helena took to motherhood with surprising ease, her protective instincts overriding her fears. When she held her son, she felt a fierce determination that he would grow up knowing only love and gentleness, that he would learn from his father how a real man treated women and children. The years that followed brought more changes. A daughter arrived 18 months after Thomas, a tiny thing they named Margaret Ann after Helena's mother. Then another son, William, 2 years later. The house rang with children's laughter, and Helena sometimes paused in her work to marvel at how different her life had become from what she had imagined during those dark days in Philadelphia. Carter proved to be as patient and gentle a father as he was a husband. He taught Thomas to ride and rope, showing him how to treat animals with kindness. He braided Margaret's hair and told her she could do anything her brothers could do. He carried William on his shoulders through the fields, pointing out birds and explaining how things grew. Mrs. Chen remained with them, becoming a beloved grandmother figure to the children. She taught them to count in Chinese and made them special treats on holidays. And when Helena and Carter needed time alone, she watched the children with fierce protective love. 5 years after Helena's arrival in Sacramento, they attended a community gathering, something Helena had avoided for years. But she felt ready now, strong enough in her healing to venture into crowds without fear overwhelming her. Carter stayed close, not hovering but present, a steady anchor if she needed him. Tom Stevens approached, older now but still friendly. "Good to see you, Carter, and Mrs. Mitchell, you are looking well." "Thank you," Helena said and meant it. "Heard you have quite the family now." 3 little ones. "Yes," Carter said proudly. "Thomas is 5, Margaret 3, and William just turned 1. "Well, congratulations. It seems marriage suits you both." As they drove home that evening, children sleeping in the back of the wagon, Carter glanced at Helena. "You did well today. I know crowds are still hard. It is getting easier. I think having the children helps. They need to see that the world can be good, that people can be kind. I cannot model fear for them." "You model courage," Carter corrected. "Every day." One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, Helena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 6 years ago, She had been a terrified woman fleeing trauma, barely able to function. Now she was a wife, a mother, a woman who had learned that healing was possible, that love could be gentle, that trust could be earned and maintained. "What are you thinking about?" Carter asked, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "How far we have come. How different everything is from what I expected. Better or worse, so much better. I never imagined I could be this happy, this at peace." She tilted her head to look up at him. "You kept your promise. You taught me trust. You did the hard work," Carter said. "I just provided the space for it." "No, it was more than that. You showed me what a good man looks like. You showed me that love could be patient and kind, that marriage could be partnership rather than ownership. You gave me back my life." Carter kissed the top of her head. "You gave me a life worth living. Before you, I was just going through motions, existing but not truly alive. You and the children, you are my purpose, my joy. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy who did not know how to court properly." Helena laughed softly. "You courted me perfectly. You gave me exactly what I needed." As the years continued to pass, the Mitchell Ranch prospered. Carter expanded the herd, built additional structures, hired seasonal help as needed. Helena's garden became famous in the area, producing abundant vegetables and beautiful flowers. The children grew strong and healthy, each developing their own personalities and interests. Thomas inherited his father's quiet strength and love of the land. Margaret showed a gift for working with horses that surprised everyone. William developed a keen intelligence and curiosity about everything, constantly asking questions and seeking to understand how things worked. When Thomas was 10, Helena took him aside one day and told him about her past, about what had happened with Richard Hartley, about the fear and the healing. She felt he was old enough to understand, old enough to learn the lesson she so desperately wanted him to absorb. "Your father showed me what it means to be a good man," she told him. "He taught me that real strength is in gentleness, that true power is in protecting rather than dominating. I am telling you this because I want you to grow up understanding how you should treat women, how you should treat everyone, with respect, with kindness, with patience." Thomas, serious beyond his years, nodded solemnly. "I want to be like Pa. He is the best man I know." "He is," Helena agreed. "And I know you will be just like him." She had similar conversations with Margaret as she grew, teaching her that she deserved respect, that no man had the right to make her feel afraid or small, that she should never accept less than she was worth. And with William, who was tender-hearted and sensitive, she nurtured his gentle nature, refusing to let anyone tell him that kindness was weakness. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Carter surprised Helena with a trip to San Francisco, their first time away from the ranch and children together. Mrs. Chen and Thomas, now 12 and responsible, promised to manage things in their absence in the city. Carter showed Helena the theater she had missed, took her to fine restaurants, bought her a beautiful dress she protested was too expensive. But more than the activities, it was the time together, the reminder that they were not just parents but partners, lovers, best friends. "You ever regret it?" Helena asked one night as they walked along the waterfront. "Taking on a damaged woman who came with so much baggage?" Carter stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Not once. Not for a single moment. You are not damaged, Helena. You never were. You are resilient, brave, and beautiful. What happened to you was not your fault, and the fact that you survived it, that you chose to keep living, to keep hoping, that is extraordinary. I am honored to be your husband, honored to witness your strength every day." Helena felt tears prick her eyes. Even after 10 years, his words could move her, his steadfast love could undo her. "I love you, more than I ever thought possible to love someone. And I love you, Always have, always will. They returned to the ranch renewed, ready to dive back into the beautiful chaos of family life. The children had missed them desperately, climbing all over them and talking over each other in their eagerness to share everything that had happened in their absence. As the years continued, Helena occasionally heard news from Philadelphia through old acquaintances. Richard Hartley had married, produced children, maintained his respectable facade. Sometimes she felt a flicker of anger that he had never faced consequences, that he had gone on to live a normal life while she had been forced to flee. But then she would look at Carter, at their children, at the life they had built, and realize that living well truly was the best revenge. She was happy, genuinely happy, in a way Richard's money and status could never buy. She had found real love, built a real family, created something beautiful from the ashes of trauma. When Helena turned 40, Carter threw her a party, inviting their extended community. She stood on the porch of their home, surrounded by friends and family, watching Thomas dance with a young woman from town. Margaret teach William a complicated roping trick, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the path her life had taken. Mrs. Chen, now in her 70s but still sharp as ever, came to stand beside her. "You have done well, child, better than well. You have built a beautiful life." "We have," Helena corrected, "all of us together." That night, after everyone had gone and the children were asleep, Helena and Carter sat in their customary spot on the porch. The stars wheeled overhead, unchanged from that first night she had arrived, terrified and trembling, all those years ago. "You remember when you first came here?" Carter asked, as if reading her thoughts. "How scared you were." "I remember. I thought I might die of fear right there on that stagecoach. I knew the moment I saw you that it was going to be a long road, but I also knew you were worth every step of that journey." "Did you know we would end up here, like this?" Carter considered. "I hoped, but I did not dare assume. You were so hurt, so frightened. I just wanted to help you find peace, even if that meant being friends rather than spouses. But you loved me even then." "Yes. I loved your courage, your determination to keep going despite everything. I loved your honesty in your letters, the way you did not try to hide your scars. I loved your hope that life could be better. And when I met you in person, saw that fear and that strength coexisting, I was lost. I knew I would do whatever it took to be worthy of your trust." Helena reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "You know what I realized? That day on the stagecoach, I was running away from pain. But somewhere along the way, I started running toward something instead. Toward you, toward this life, toward happiness. The fear will always be part of my story, but it is not the whole story anymore. No, it is not. You are so much more than what happened to you. You are a wife, a mother, a friend, a cornerstone of this community. You are strong and kind and wise. You are everything I could have asked for and so much more." As they sat in the gathering darkness, holding hands and watching the stars, Helena thought about how she would tell her story if asked. It would not be a tale of a victim, though she had been victimized. It would not be a story of overcoming, though she had overcome much. Instead, it would be a love story, plain and simple. A story about a lonely cowboy who offered patience and kindness to a frightened woman. About a woman who found the courage to try again, to trust again, to love again. About two people who built something beautiful together, one careful day at a time. It would be a story about choosing healing over bitterness, hope over despair, love over fear. About learning that safety was possible, that goodness existed, that happily ever after was not just a fairy tale but a life you built with your own hands and heart. In the years that followed, as their children grew and married and brought grandchildren into their lives, as the ranch passed from Carter's hands to Thomas's, As they grew old together, Helena never forgot the terror of that first day or the gentle promise Carter had made. Then I will teach you trust. He had kept that promise, and in doing so had given her back herself. And she had given him her heart, freely and fully, knowing it would be cherished and protected. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, Carter and Helena renewed their vows in the same small church where they had first married. Carter's hair was white now, his back bent from years of ranch work, but his eyes were still the same summer blue, still full of love when he looked at her. "I promise to love you until my last breath and beyond," he said, his voice wavering with age but strong with conviction. "I promise to trust you, always and forever," Helena replied, tears streaming down her weathered face. Later, sitting on the porch they had occupied for 50 years, watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar shades of orange and pink, Helena reflected on the extraordinary gift of their ordinary life. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" Carter asked, though he knew. "For seeing me when I was invisible with fear, for waiting when I needed time, for teaching me that love could be gentle, for giving me a life beyond my wildest dreams, for everything." Carter squeezed her hand, the gesture as familiar as breathing after 5 decades. "Thank you for saying yes. For getting on that stage, coach, for choosing to try, for giving me the honor of loving you." As darkness fell and stars emerged, they sat together as they had thousands of times before, hands clasped, hearts intertwined, living proof that love truly could conquer fear, that patience could heal wounds, that trust once earned could sustain a lifetime. The wind rustled through the oak trees, carrying the sound of their grandchildren's laughter from inside the house, and Helena smiled. She had been so afraid that day in 1872 when she stepped off the stagecoach into an uncertain future. But that fear had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this beautiful, impossible, perfect life. And if she could go back and tell that terrified girl what awaited her, she would say, "Hold on. Be brave. Trust is coming. Love is coming. Home is coming. The journey will be hard, but the destination will be worth every frightening step." The mail-order bride who said, "I am afraid of men," had found the lonely cowboy who said, "Then I will teach you trust." And together they had written a love story for the ages, one gentle moment at a time.